The International Space Station Assembly Hall shimmered under cold white lights, rows of glass consoles humming softly. 12 candidates sat in perfect formation, 6 men, 6 women, all silent, all uncertain about why they've been summoned. Steve leaned closely to a young woman beside him. Her posture was rigid, her dark eyes scanning the room with restless energy. "I'm Steve," he whispered, breaking the silence. "Top of my class in training program, survival, logic, strategy, you name it." He gave her a confident smile. "I chose you as my partner, Sable, even though you came in second." She blinked at him, caught off guard. Thank you?" Her voice carried a trace of sarcasm. "Honestly, I still don't understand what all this was about. They trained us, tested us, kept us in the dark, and now this." She gestured at the hall, its towering screens flickering with mission insignias she didn't recognize. Before Steve could reply, a sharp clap echoed across the chamber. General Reyes stepped onto the podium, his boots striking the polished floor like drumbeats. His face was carved with eyes of command, his voice a weapon that cut through the tension. "You've been chosen," he began, "because you are the best. Each of you endured the most advanced classified training humanity has ever devised. 6 men, 6 women. The men trained in logic, survival, endurance. The women in intuition, leadership, adaptability. Together, you are humanity's spearhead." The room was deathly silent. Sabla leaned forward, hanging on every word. "Your mission," Reyes continues, "is simple to say, but dangerous beyond measure. You will leave the solar system." A murmur swept through the hall, quickly silenced by Reyes' raised hand. "Yes, the technology exists. Wormhole transit. Officially, the public knows nothing, but today you will use it. Each pair will board a ship. Each ship will pass through the wormhole, arriving at a destination chosen for its promise of life or danger. Once there, you'll take a lander and explore the planet. You will have exactly 48 hours to complete your survey." Steve felt his pulse quicken. Sable's lips parted, as though she was about to object, but she said nothing. Reyes' voice hardened. "The wormhole can only be opened from this side. After 48 hours, you must return to your ship and wait at the exact coordinates where you emerged. A communications window will open. If you do not respond, the wormhole will close after 2 minutes. If that happens," his gaze swept over them like a blade, "you are lost." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the hum of a machinery. "Good luck," Reyes finished. "Humanity's future depends on you. Now board your ships." One by one the pairs rose, moving towards a hangar. Sable and Steve followed, their footsteps echoing against steel. The first ship launched, sliding gracefully into the shimmering blue ellipse of the wormhole. In an instant, it vanished. Steve gripped the armrest of their small cockpit seat, his confidence faltering for the first time. Sable glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Next came the command over comms. The wormhole recalibrated, its surface swirling like liquid glass. Their ship slid forward, and the stars bent, twisted, and collapsed into darkness. A heartbeat later, the void opened again. Before them loomed a blazing star, massive and violent, its light casting their cockpit in molten gold. Orbiting close around it was a small rocky planet, scarred and silent. Sable exhaled, her voice trembling with awe. "Well, would you look at that?" she said. Steve leaned closer to the viewport, grin tugging at his lips. "No, we are somewhere no human has ever been." The ship descended, the planet swelling beneath them, alien, barren, waiting. From orbit, the planet looked like an emerald veiled in smoke. Its atmosphere was thick, swirling with golden clouds, and hid the surface below. Steve adjusted the controls, drove forward. Readings confirm it's breathable, mostly carbon dioxide, some exotic trace gases. Not exactly welcoming, he muttered. Sabla leaned over, her gaze fixed on the display. Thick atmosphere, high pressure. If we want answers, we can't stay up here. We have to land. Steve shot her crooked grin. Straight into the unknown, just the way I like it. She gave him a sidelong look, unimpressed. Confidence is easy when you haven't seen the ground yet. When they broke through the cloud cover, the surface revealed itself in dazzling, impossible shapes. Rock outcrops jutted skyward like coral reefs, jagged spires stretching for kilometers between them. Rivers of molten stone glowed faintly, feeding into one supermassive ocean that sat like a dark heart at the center of the planet. Holy! Steve's voice trailed off as he guided the lander lower. That's not terrain. That's a sculpture. Nature on steroids. The shore, Sabla pointed out. It is the only flat stretch we get. Steve groaned, but banked the lander toward the northern coastline. The rest of the planet was too hostile, too chaotic to risk. They touched down on a narrow strip of rock where the ocean waves lapped sluggishly, thick and murky like oil. As the lander's ramp lowered, Sabla stepped out first, her nanosuit adjusting instantly to the alien light. Gold scales shimmered with white edges, a living armor that rippled as she moved. Steve followed, his own suit a pale blue, traced with white, flexing as though it breathed with him. The suit can read the emotions and feelings of its wearers and adjusts accordingly. It's bulletproof, fireproof, waterproof. It keeps the wearer warm when the outside atmosphere is cold and keeps them cool when it's hot. She looked around, awestruck. It's alive, she whispered, and it was. The ground itself seemed restless. Strange plants sprouted before their eyes, shoots piercing the soil, blooming in seconds, releasing clouds of spores before collapsing back into mulch. Others burst from cracks in the rocks, blossomed, withered and died, all within a minute. The air was thick with nutrients and shifting gases. Every breath filtered through their suits. Evolution on fast forward, Steve murmured, crouching to examine a flower that wilted into dust even as he reached for it. Whole life cycle in minutes. That's insane. Sabla's eyes tracked the sky. Not just plants. Look! Above them, flocks of bird-like creatures wheeled and screeched, wings shimmering like glass. Every living thing here seemed made for flight, as if the ground could never be trusted. In the distance, half a dozen volcanoes erupted in unison, fountains of molten fire staining the clouds. Steve whistled low. Hell of a neighborhood. The ground trembled. Sabla froze. Do you feel? The earth split beneath them. A crack shot across the ground, tearing wider with a sound like the planet itself screaming. Sabla staggered back, Steve grabbing her arm as the rock split open, pulling apart faster than they could run. Move! Steve shouted. They sprinted, the crack chasing their heels, the world collapsing into a jagged abyss. Dust and fire roared up around them as the fissure widened into a yawning gorge. When they finally skidded to a halt, Gasping, they looked down into the chasm. The lander was gone. At the gorge's bottom, half buried in rock and mud, the silver hull lay crushed. And then the tide came. Water from the great ocean surging inward. Within moments, the lander disappeared beneath the dark, churning waves. No, no, no! Steve's voice cracked. Hands pressed to his helmet. Sabla tapped her wrist calm, her voice sharp. Control, this is Sabla. And Steve, do you copy? Respond. Only static hissed in their ears. The atmosphere was too dense, too hostile for clean transmission. They were cut off. Sabla lowered her arm, her expression grim beneath the golden shimmer of her suit. We're stranded. Steve swallowed hard, scanning the horizon, where volcanoes painted the sky red. Stranded on a death trap of a planet with no way to reach the ship. Sabla turned to him, her voice quiet but steady, each word carrying steel. Then we survive. That's what we are trained for. Steve met her eyes, the first trace of doubt flickering in his brain. Yeah, but training didn't prepare us for this. Above them, the bird creatures screamed as if laughing, circling in the sulphurous sky. The gorge boiled with seawater below. The first drop hissed against Sabla's suit. She flinched, scanning the sky. Rain? Steve muttered, tilting his head back. Finally something normal, but the droplets struck the rocks around them with sharp, sizzling pops. White smoke curled up from the ground where the rain landed. Sabla's voice tightened. It's not normal. By the time realization sank in, the downpour thickened into sheets of burning water. Their suits fireproof, alright, spaceproof, resisted, but the acid sting showed up on their heads as warnings. Red alert scrolled across Steve's visor. Surface integrity at 98%, 97%. Cave! Sabla shouted, pointing toward a dark opening carved into the cliff face. They sprinted, boots skidding across the sleek, corroding stone, and dove into the shadows just as the storm intensified. The cave swallowed them. The acid roar muffled to a distant hiss. Inside, silence pressed in, broken only by the hiss of their own breath. Steve leaned against the wall, catching himself. Well, that was fun. Sabla shot him a glare. One more storm like that and our suit won't hold. They stripped off their helmets, but kept the suit sealed. The cave air was heavy, but safe enough for now. The acid rain hammered outside, a relentless drumming that lasted long into the night. Exhaustion pulled them down, and against the cold stone they slept. When Sabla opened her eyes, a glow filled the cave. For a heartbeat, she thought the sun had risen inside. Then she saw it, a pool in the center of the cavern, shimmering in impossible colors. Emerald, crimson, gold. The water pulsed as though alive, casting rippling hues across the cave walls. Steve, she whispered, tugging at his shoulders. He groaned awake, then blinked at the sight. What in the... He was on his feet instantly. Don't touch it! Sabla had already stepped closer, her eyes wide with wonder. It's beautiful, like melted gemstones. He grabbed her wrist before she could kneel. Sabla, the readings are off the charts. That's pure acid. It will eat through even your suit. The spell broke. She stepped back reluctantly, her expression sobering. Even beauty here is deadly. When they emerged from the cave, dawn had reshaped the world again. Steve froze. Wait, weren't we on the ground level? The landmass had grown overnight. What had been a cave mouth at their shoulders was now perched high on a newly formed hill. The planet had shifted again. raising the ground like a living thing. Sable exhaled sharply. Talol doesn't sleep, does it? Then neither do we, Steve muttered. He pointed upward. Climb higher ground. Better comes. They scaled the unstable slope, boots crashing over freshly formed rocks, until they reached the summit. Steve tapped his wrist unit. Control, this is Team Delta. Do you copy? Static. Then, Delta, we read you. Coordinates locked. Dispatching lander. Relief flooded them both. Sable allowed herself a small smile. Looks like we're going home. From their vantage point, they watched the disc-shaped lander cut through the clouds, descending gracefully towards the shoreline. It touched down on the sand, its legged, sinking slightly into the wet ground. But then Sabla noticed the horizon. Steve, the ocean. The murky sea was rising, swelling as if pulled upward by some unseen force. Water surged against the shore, climbing steadily towards the lander. Move! Steve shouted. They scrambled down the slope, rocks sliding under their boots, the roar of rushing water chasing them. The lander's legs were already knee-deep when they reached it. Sable vaulted onto the ramp, Steve shoving her forward before hauling himself up after her. The hatch sealed. Engines roared. The lander lifted just as the sea surged higher, swallowing the beach whole. Inside, both of them sat gasping, helmets fogged, adrenaline pounding. They didn't speak until the lander docked with their ship in orbit. Back at the space station, General Reese's face filled the debriefing room. He was all smiles at first. Excellent work. The resources on Dalol are beyond imagination. That ocean alone. Then his tone shifted, sharp and cutting. But you abandoned your post 48 hours and you lasted only one. Where are the samples? Where is the data? You risked a lander for nothing. Sable stiffened. With respect, sir, the planet is unstable. We couldn't risk a second lander. The terrain changes overnight. Acid rain corrodes everything. It's unpredictable. Incompetence is what I hear. Reese slammed his hand on the console. If you can't handle one planet, I'll send Team A. They'll do the job properly. Steve's jaw tightened, but he held back. Reese leaned in, his gaze cold. Rest up. You leave in 24 hours for your next mission. Dismissed. They exchanged a look in the corridor. Equal parts frustration, fear, and determination. Sabla finally spoke. Dalol wasn't just a planet. It was a warning. Steve nodded grimly, and nobody up there listened.
The planet filled their viewport like a bruise against a red giant star. Its surface smothered in thick, rust-colored clouds. Steve leaned forward, eyes narrowed. There, did you see that? Sable followed his gaze. A dark object, sleek, deliberate, slid across the horizon before vanishing into the far side of the planet. Not a meteor, not natural. Satellite, she breathed. Which means someone's down there. The cabin was quiet, except for the soft hum of instruments. They exchanged a glance. Steve broke it first. We going carefully. Land away from the city. Minutes later, the disc-shaped lander detached and slipped into the churning atmosphere. Clouds wrapped them in orange haze, lightning flashing in the distance. When the turbulence cleared, the surface emerged, a vast jungle stretching out of the horizon, a city skyline jagged in the distance like teeth against the sky. Sabla pointed. The jungle. We keep our distance. The lander touched down on a clearing. hissing as its legs sank into the mossy ground. Outside, the air shimmered, dense with unseen gases. The nanosuits shifted to new shades. Sable's golden plates dulled to bronze. Steve's blue blade into gray, camouflage against the foliage. The jungle was alive with movements. Bird-like creatures fluttered around the trees, their wings translucent. Insects buzzed in radiant swarms, glowing green and violet. Reptiles slithered along the trunks, eyes glinting with alien hunger. No mammals, Steve muttered. None at all. Evolution went another way here, Sable whispered back. Sudden rustle froze them both. Something moved ahead, something upright. Out of the shadows stepped a humanoid reptile. Scaled skin shimmered, iridescent, its elongated eyes narrowing as it looked unto them. Steve's hand twitched toward his sidearm. But before he could draw, the creature hissed and motioned urgently. Shelter! Now! It rushed them toward a stone-like structure half buried in the jungle floor. Inside, the air cooled, filled with faint mechanical hums. Before either explorer could speak, the reptilian produced a device, holding it to their temples. Sabla jerked back. What? Relax, the creature rasped. Scan. Light seared across their vision, a flood of images, memories, languages, thought patterns surged and faded in an instant. When it was over, the reptilian staggered, eyes glowing faintly. Then in perfect English, "You're not from Slushy," Sable gasped. Steve's eyes widened. The reptilian straightened its voice. Steadier now. I am Snakes of the East. This planet, Slushy, bleeds war. 5 species. One ruled its 4 great continents. Now the Shirkans rise above all. Soon, only they will remain. Zebla exchanged a look with Steve. And you people? Endangered. Snake's crest lowered in sorrow. We are shepherds, able to change form, to learn quickly, to adapt. Yet it's not enough. The Shirkans hunt us. They will finish the extermination soon. The restro tightened. Is there anything we can do? Snake's eyes faltered. Luminous. Yes, take us away. If the Ishers are to survive, we must leave Slushy. A low hum broke the moment. Steve froze. You hear that? The pitch grew louder, mechanical, closer, like a swarm of metallic wasps. Snakes snarled. Drones hide. A drone whirred through the shelter window, its red sensors scanning the room. Before it could react, Snakes raised a pulse rifle and fired. The explosion rattled the walls, the drone collapsing in sparks and smoke. No time. Snakes moved quickly, her claws scraping across the hidden panel in the floor. It hissed open, revealing a narrow basement lined with forest. Inside sat a massive flask, its surface glowing with cold. Within the flask floated 20 pale eggs, pulsing faintly with life. Silver's breath caught. Are these our last generation? Snakes hoisted the containers, muscles straining. Help me carry them. If they die, we are finished. The jungle erupted with noise as they burst from the shelter. Distant shouts, mechanical wings scattering through the air. Pulse fire scorched the trees around them. Faster, Steve urged, covering their retreat with bursts from his sidearms. They broke into a clearing where the lander waited, its hatch yawning open, but figures emerged from the foliage. Shirkan soldiers, tall, armored, rifles glowing with deadly heat. Snakes shoved the container into Sable's hands. Take it, find them a home. No, come with us, Sable pleaded. Snake's eyes softened, then hardened again. She spun, charging the soldiers, rifle blazing. Go! Sable and Steve scrambled into the lander, the hatch sealing just as gunfire split the air. Through the viewport, they saw Snakes fell beneath the shuriken barrage, her form collapsing in a storm of sparks and blood. Then the jungle erupted with fire as the lander roared upward. Pulse bolts streaked past them, searing the air. Steve gritted his teeth. Hang on! They broke through the atmosphere into the blackness of space and froze. Where their mothership had been, there was only wreckage. Fragments of metal drifted silently, glowing faintly in the red giant's light. Sable clutched the container to her chest, her voice breaking. Steve, they destroyed it. The void swallowed them in silence, alone, adrift, holding the last hope of a dying species. The wreckage of their mothership drifted silently behind them, glittering against the red giant's light. Steve broke the silence first. We won't last in orbit. Sable held the container of issued eggs tighter. Then where? He looked at the shrinking curve of a slushy below. We go back down. If we wait out for 48 hours until the wormhole reopens, we might still make it home. The word home felt strange after what they had just seen, but Sable nodded. Then we hide. The lander plunged once more through Slushy's atmosphere. This time, instead of the sprawling jungles or the burning cities, they chose the far south, jagged islands in an endless, storm-wrecked sea. From orbit, they had seen no sign of civilization, a good sign. The lander hissed as it settled on black volcanic rock. Around them, glaciers rose like broken teeth, mist trailing across the horizon. Remote, desolate, perfect, Steve muttered. They stepped out into the icy wind, their suits shifting colors to match the terrain. For a while, silence reigned. No drones, no soldiers, just wind and the distant crash of waves. Then came the growl, low, rumbling, wrong. They looked around, eyes widening. From the shadows of the rocks emerged a reptile, longer than the lander itself, scale rippling with color. Like living oil, a brilliant frill flared from its neck, crackling as if alive with static. Steve, Sable whispered, it's beautiful. The creature hissed. Then it spat. A jet of sizzling liquid seared the stone where they had stood seconds before, the rock bubbling and smoking as though it had been dropped into acid. Move! Steve shouted, pulling her behind a rigid as another blast streaked past them. The creature lunged, jaws snapping. They scrambled, firing their sidearms. Blue burst struck its frill, leaving scorched marks but barely slowing it. He's shrugging it off, Steve shouted. Go for the ice. Sable labeled her weapon, heart pounding. As the reptile reared back, she fired. The bolt lanced straight through its left eye. The creature shrieked as it thrashed against the rocks. Steve delivered the final shot at its throat, where the scales were thinner. The monster collapsed, acid spilling from its jaws, burning trenches into the ground. Both of them stood gasping. Their suits flickered with debris. Sylvia bent over, clutching her knees. "You barely made it." Steve glanced at the container still slung across her chest. Unscathed, he exhaled. 40 hours. We just have to survive 40 hours. The hours crawled. Acid rain hammered the lander's shell. Strange shadows circled above. Reptilian wings slicing through the mist. Twice they had to fight off, tears clashing against their suit's nanoscopic armor. Each moment stretched, a test of patience and endurance. Finally, mercifully, the comms stripped. "The wormhole's open," Steve said, relief cutting through his exhaustion. "Time's up." They launched from the desolate island, rising back into the crimson sky. Ahead, a shimmering hole in space twisted into existence. The wormhole, their lifeline. Sable's praise quotes, "We're going home." But as they drew closer, something slid into view. A satellite, black, angular, its surface bristling with weapons. "It's waiting for us." Steve's voice was tight. The satellite rotated, energy building along its spine. Then it fired. The lander jolted violently, alarms blaring as plasma tore across its hull. Steve gritted his teeth, wrestling the controls. "Hold on!" Another blast struck, searing one wing of the craft. Flames burst across their displays, warning lights screaming. Sable clutched the containers tight, whispering to the unborn issues within. "Not here, not like this," Steve roared, forcing the lander forward. The wormhole loomed shimmering alive. The satellite fired again. The beam lanced past them, then followed, threading itself into the wormhole as they crossed the event horizon. Light swallowed them. They merged back into the hangar of the International Space Agency's orbital station. But the victory was hollow. The energy beam, still coherent, ripped through with them. It slammed into the station's hull, exploding in sparks and shrapnel. Sirens blared as fire suppression systems screamed into life. General Reyes stormed into the control deck, his face red with fury. "You damaged the station. You nearly destroyed the wormhole gate." His voice shook with rage. "If we lose one more ship, you're finished. Do you hear me?" Sable stood stiffly, her arms still wrapped around the flask of eggs. Steve said nothing. Jaw clenched, eyes burning. Reyes stabbed a finger towards them. "One more failure, and you're both out." The room fell into silence. The only sound, the faint hum of the damaged systems struggling to hold. Sable met Steve's gaze, her voice low. "We're carrying more than just ourselves now." Steve nodded grimly. "Then we can't fail them." The moment the ship broke through the wormhole, light enveloped them, pure, blinding, and absolute. The controls went dead. The ship stopped moving. "Steve!" Sable's voice was tight. "We caught." Before he could answer, a sharp hum vibrated through the hall. A beam of light wrapped around them, squeezing every thought from his mind. Then darkness. When Steve's eyes opened, the world felt wrong, cold, sterile. They were standing, not floating. A shimmering glass wall curved around them like a cage. Beyond it, vast halls stretched endlessly, white and gleaming, filled with towering beings unlike anything they had imagined. The aliens were tall, their frames delicate yet impossibly strong, their skin translucent silver that caught the refracted light. They glided rather than walked, silent, their faces smooth and unreadable. Crowds of them gathered, gazing in at the two strangers with detached fascinations. Some pointed with long, elegant fingers. Others leaned in, studying their suits, their movements, their humanity. "We are in a zoo," Steve whispered, his throat dry. Sabla pressed a hand to the glass. They don't see us as explorers. For 40 long hours, they endured it. No food, no water, just constant clinical observation. Whenever they tried to signal, gesture, writing, even desperate miming, the aliens only tilted their heads, looking at each other with glances and subtle expressions. It wasn't until the 39th hour that Steve noticed they never speak. Sabla looked at him, frowning. Not once, not a sound, not a word. They just looked at each other, and then they moved. He leaned closer, his voice urgent. "They are telepathic." Her eyes widened. "So we have been barking at them like dogs in a glass cage." "Exactly. And if anyone can reach them, it's you." Sabla's hands trembled, but she closed her eyes, focusing. Her suit's nanoscales shimmered faintly, reflecting her pulse. She pushed past the fear, the humiliation, the anger, reaching not with words, but with thoughts. "We're not animals, we are explorers." The effect was immediate. One of the aliens stopped mid-step, its head turning sharply towards her. Then another and another. A low ripple spread through the crowd, silent but undeniable. Finally, one step closer, eyes glowing with the faint inner light. A voice, soft and melodic, echoed directly in Sabla's mind. "You speak?" She nearly staggered. "Yes, we speak. We came through the wormhole to learn, to make contact." A pause. Then, "Forgive us. To us, only those who think without words are advanced. Others are animals." We did not mean offense. Images poured into her mind. Galaxies unfolding, civilizations rising and falling, an ocean of telepathic memories, far older than ours. She gasped and clutched her head. Steve grabbed her shoulders. "Stop! What are they saying?" She opened her eyes, tears glistening. They didn't see us as equals. Not yet." Moments later, they were released. The aliens escorted them, silent and graceful, back to orbit. Their ship, repaired, spotless, waited. The leading alien sent one final thought into her mind, as clear as if it had been carved into her soul. "Do not return. We will contact your world in 200 years. If you have learned by then, we will listen." And just like that, they were gone. The ship was nudged gently towards the wormhole, sent back toward home. When they delivered their report, General Reyes was livid. "So they caged you like zoo animals? Dismissed our species as primitives? And told you not to return?" His fist slammed onto the table. "Then they are hostile. Oh, guards, that's what we will call them. A hostile planet." Sabla flinched at the word, but spoke anyway. "They're not hostile. They're beyond us. They just don't think we are ready." Reyes leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Then we will make ourselves ready. And when they come back, ours won't be begging for recognition. We will be demanding it." Steve and Sabla exchanged glances, the unspoken question heavy between them. Ready for what?
After human beings discovered wormhole technology, 2 astronauts left the International Space Station to visit one of the planets that were expected to harbor life. One of these planets were Planet Orange, as it was later on discovered to be. The 2 astronauts, Sabla and Steve, have looked out from their disc-shaped. They look at the planet that was orbiting a giant raid. The planet's surface was surprisingly orange, and there were several satellites that were broken down around its orbit. They decided to monitor the situation, but Sabla refused that they can't take a lander to the planet because something seems off. At first, Steve didn't understand why she refused.
So, according to protocol, they sent 2 drones to monitor the situation. Although the planet seems like it has civilized life, it awfully seems it's dead and rather lifeless. The drones descend into the orbit. Orange clouds greeted them upon entry. As they descend down, they observe that the whole planet was covered with orange dust. As they descend down, they met streets and cities, and they were all abandoned and cracking and crumbling. The streets were covered with orange dust. As they descend down into the street level, they witnessed rotten carcasses everywhere, skeletons covered with orange dust, flowering and releasing spores. The buildings were all covered with orange dust. All the trees were dead. All the animals in the fields lay on the ground dead and covered with orange dust. Rivers, lakes, oceans were covered with the stuff. The onboard computer told Sabla and Steve that the situation was horrific, and that what happened is that the planet was clearly has been wiped out by what seems like a fungus, a bioengineered fungus. The inhabitants were reptilian humanoid species. From the bones that remained on the street, the computer analyzed that these reptilian humanoid species have developed some form of biological weapon that took over the whole planet, and now every living thing wiped out. All the streets abandoned and empty. Only a single life form lives on that planet now. The fungus, the orange fungus that took over every corner of the planet. Sabla was shocked at this discovery. As they move around the planet's orbit, they met a huge spaceship that was under construction, but it was never finished. It was only half completed. Its hull still empty. It seems the inhabitants were attempting to flee, but they were too late. Steve wanted to collect samples that this kind of biological weapon could come handy, but Sabla refused. If this organism reached Earth, it will wipe out the planet. In fear of contamination, the onboard computer sent message to the 2 drones that descended on the planet to self-destruct. The drones detonated mid-air. When the 2 astronauts returned to the International Space Station Mission Control, their commander, General Reyes, was outraged. He wanted them to collect samples, and such a biological weapon could have been very useful for planetary defense. However, Sabla refused, and she threatened that a second mission to the planet should be cancelled, and that no one should ever set foot on that planet, or else it will be the end of humanity. It was a very dangerous fungus, and if it is brought to Earth, it will wipe out humanity. And that she wanted the planet to be declared quarantined, and no further missions should be carried out on that planet. However, General Reyes didn't agree with her recommendations. She threatened that she would go public with the information if this protocol wasn't met. Reluctantly, General Reyes accepted her recommendation, but she knew very well this wasn't the end of Planet Orange. As the spaceship exited the wormhole, the 2 astronauts' jaws dropped. A huge, beautiful blue planet emerged on their screen. It was twice the size of Earth, and it was something like nothing they have ever seen. The analysis on the monitor showed that the planet is oxygen-rich and it has several life forms, and the air is breathable. It is one of the most hospitable planets that they have ever seen. However, there are no signs of intelligent life. So the astronauts, Sabla and Steve, entered one of their landers, a disc-shaped lander, and descended on the planet. As they moved closer past the thick atmosphere of the planet, they have witnessed something amazing. as most of the planet is covered with vegetation, unlike nothing they have ever seen. They've seen trees that are extremely large, skyscraper trees that reached beyond the clouds, that are covered with ice caps, huge trees the size of hills. They tried to find a place to land, but they couldn't, so they circled around and found that one of the tree tracks high in the canopies were big enough to land their small lander. So they land on a tree track and they get out of their spaceship. What met them was something they have never expected. The planet was noisy. All kinds of rackets they were hearing, animal calls, birds chirping and howling, and all kinds of noise greeted them. It was a chorus of whistles, growls, bellows, and crackles. It was so loud that it was deafening. The two astronauts tried to cover their ears, but the noise was overwhelming. Their spacesuits has nanoids. Their nanotech suits protect their ears from the extreme noise. Then they started climbing down the tree. Climbing down the tree was very easy because the tree was huge and its trunk had cracks, and they were using those cracks as ladders to descend down the tree. But their descent wasn't easy. Roots and animals were all over the tree trunk. All kinds of alien creatures were living on that tree, and they were all hostile. They were all attacking them, and they have to defend themselves. From the animals, not only the animals, but the roots of the animals. There were trees growing on the tree, and their roots flare around mid-air, attacking whatever passes by. One of these roots grabs hold of Sabla. It wraps around her leg like a snake. They have to cut through it to free Sabla. And there were also worm-like creatures all over the tree trunk. They were attacking them. However, their nanotech suit protects them. They scrambled to get to the bottom of the tree because they have to collect samples from the ground. They have to collect dirt and soil from the earth. However, when they reach the ground, the root of the tree grabbed hold both of them, and they were unable to move, and the pressure and the tree root coiled around them, suffocating them. Their suit couldn't protect them from the pressure, and then came needles out of the roots, and they tried to pick through their clothes. The suit held. Sabla and Steve found themselves tied to a tree in a strange planet under a strange tree the size of a skyscraper. They were unable to move, and the root system was tightening itself around their nanosuits. Needles protrude from the roots and tried to prick through their nanosuits. It held. However, they struggled, but they couldn't free themselves. After getting tied to a tree for minutes, the tree gave up and released its hostages. Sabla and Steve Bridges gasped as they moved away from the tree, the true hero being their suit. They looked at their surroundings and found that everything around them was hostile. And they found that soon a worm-like creature rushed towards them. It seems that the worm has a soft body. One of the roots tied its root around the worm. Needles protruded from the roots, stabbed the worm, and drained the worm of its valuable nutrients. What's left was the skin of the worm. Then the root threw that skin as if a discarded garbage. Sabla and Steve went over to the worm to check if it was still alive. It was lifeless. Whatever was inside the worm was gone, sucked dry by the root of the tree. Not only the animals on that planet, but the plants were dangerous, far dangerous. Soon they went to work and started collecting samples. They found a bug. They found that even that wasn't easy. There were roots tangled on the floor, and to find dirt was extremely hard. so they have to cut through the tangled web of roots and reach the ground, and mostly it's rocky. After searching for several minutes, they found a patch of dirt. They collected it in a bag. With relief, Steve was looking at the bag, admiring it, and saying how hard they work just to get that simple sample. Soon, a root system started rushing towards them. It snatched the plastic bag from Steve's hand. Its thorns emerged from the root and pricked through the bag. A liquid was released into the bag, and they sucked. All the soil that they collected in the bag was gone. The root then mockingly threw the empty bag at Steve and retreated. Steve laughed. This planet is full of thieves. Then they were back at it again, searching for another patch of dirt they can collect. After working for several hours, they discovered a small patch of earth. They collect sample and started going back and head back to their ship and head back to the lander. Inside the lander, Sabila found an incubator full of hatched eggs. Snakes have interested on her from the planet Slushy. She looked at the eggs lovingly and said that maybe this is where we should leave our eggs. Steve looked at her and said, "Are you mad? This planet is extremely dangerous. If they discover these eggs, you know they will take them away from us. You know they will end up in Earth in some laboratory, getting dissected by scientists. We have to leave them here. This is the best planet we have come across so far." Steve agreed, and they moved out their cargo into the surface. They left the incubator on a tree track far from the ground and the ravenous tree roots. And scary animals. They hope that they will hatch within a month. Sabla and Steve returned to their lander and lift off. Sabla looked down to the planet and prayed that the last hope of the Essex survived. They entered their main ship and waited for the wormhole to open. A few minutes later, the wormhole spiraled into life. Their ship entered it and vanished.
Steve and Sabila reached a planet that was orbiting a pulsar. The pulsar emits flashes of radiation. The planet they were after, which they named after they set foot on the planet, Farda with a P, have seen that it has a giant planet, a giant moon orbiting it. The ground looks habitable, so the two exo-astronauts leave their ship and took one of the landers to the surface of the planet. On the planet, what they witnessed was remarkable. The plants that grew on the planet were soft and full of fruits, and everywhere there were colorful plants. It wasn't like earth, soft leafed plants with no thorns or anything, and they all grow to a height of 1 meter and 1.5 meters high, and they're all full of fruits and colorful plants. So they also noticed that there were intelligent beings living on the planet, somehow primitive. So they moved to one of the settlements near a cave, and they make their landing there. As they exited the planet, the probing light that is emitted from the planet was disturbing, and the moon reflects back the flashing light that was emitted by the pulsar, which has quite an interesting effect on the surface. When the two flashes of light combined, it rather creates an atmosphere of a nightclub full of disco lights, different types of color reflected and refracted throughout the atmosphere. As they approached the cave, Sabila warned that the inhabitants could be dangerous, so they decided to split. Steve said he wanted to make first contact and that Sabla can stay behind and collect samples. So he moved on and entered the cave, while Sabla remained behind and started collecting samples. Some of the analysis suggested that most of the fruits and plants that are found on the planet seems to contain chemicals that are considered narcotic on Earth. So she rushed to the cave to warn Steve. However, it was too late. Steve had eaten the fruits and now he was intoxicated. He has taken off his suit and he was partially naked, and he was dancing with the Fardas. Now the Fardas were incredible creatures. They look like apes with large ears and large eyes and interesting fur. Most of their fur has several mixture of colors, and they look muppets rather than real life animals. And while intoxicated, Steve discovered that he can actually understand their language. Somehow their primitive language contains a lot of gesturing and few words. Within a few minutes, he said he can understand them. The cave was a big one. It has a lot of lit torches. These Fardas knew how to make fire and maintain it. And not only that, they also knew how to cook the fruits and make alcoholic drinks. And all they do is make music and dance and sing. She approached Steve and told him that the fruits were narcotic. He told her that he found the place to be paradise and enjoyable, and that he decided that this place needed to be kept from humans, that if they heard about this place, that they will destroy it, and that they don't have to make a report about the planet or give false report about Farda. Sabla agreed, but she wasn't being honest. So she told him that they needed to leave. He refused. He said she can go out and collect her samples, but he was staying with the Farda and talking to them. Meanwhile, an elderly Farda started talking to Steve. Sabla was surprised. She asked, "Do you understand what he's saying?" And Steve said yes, and he told her that the Farda have told them everything you need to know about their life. On the planet, there are no predators, only few animals that they hunt and eat. They are the apex predator on the planet, and they mostly eat fruits, and the fruits are relaxing and medicinal, as the elder told them. However, due to the high radiation of the planet, that he learned the Farda only live for up to 20 years. And Steve got up and started joining the dancing party. The Farda also have interesting habits of daring each other to do things. So Steve was dared to slam himself against a rock. He did, and broke his arm. They give him some of their potent narcotic plants, and he was okay after a while. Sabla, seeing everything that has happened in the cave, decided to go to the lander and deposit her samples. She stayed in the lander over the night. In the next morning, when she returned to the cave, she found Steve still partying with the Fardas. So she told him that the hour was reaching and that they have to make preparations to leave the planet. That's when Steve told her that he wasn't going. He told her that he found paradise and there is no way he's leaving the planet. He said goodbye to her. Sabla didn't know what to do. The two astronauts looked dead in the eye. Sabla repeated herself, this time louder. "Steve, we're leaving now. We can't stay on this planet forever." Steve told her yes, he's planning to stay there. And he told her that he's been thinking about it and that it's best for her if she doesn't leave as well. Sabla laughed and said, "You want me to stay here too?" Steve said yes. It's best if no one knows about this planet, especially General Reyes. He started making his argument. "Look at this. Look at all these beautiful things that they have here. And the Fardas, they are the most happiest, the most free people I've ever had witnessed. They're free. They enjoy life. No one on earth enjoys life like them. And if those miserable humans discover this planet, They will come here and they will ruin it. They will harvest everything. They will kill the Fardas and they will claim it for themselves. We can't allow that. The Fardas must be protected. And it's best if they never hear about this. So I suggest you stay back and start enjoying life. Sabla answered, let's talk about this outside, because the Fardas were starting to circle them and the music was getting louder. So Steve agreed with that idea and they moved out. They moved outside the cave and they started arguing. Some of the Fardas followed them out. Sabla knew what she was doing. Arguing, she started walking towards the lander. Steve followed her and he told her that they have to do whatever they can to protect the planet. And Sabla told them staying behind wasn't a good idea because soon the space station will send recovery teams. And if they come, it's even going to be worse for the planet. But Steve didn't listen. He said that they would send false signals and that they wouldn't come. We'll tell them that the planet is dangerous and coming here will cause them very bad infection, just like Planet Orange. We'll send a report that the planet is full of infections and that they contracted some infections and that they are remaining, and they would listen and they wouldn't come. As they argue and move closer to the lander, the Fardas follow them behind. Finally they reached the lander and Steve stopped Sabla from entering the lander. He told her, you can't go in there. It's very bad. Like, we can only send messages, but we can't leave this planet. Finally Sabla had enough and pulled her pulsar rifle, and she told him that he have to move out the way. He can stay if he want to, but she's not staying. Steve refused. Sabla fired her rifle gun. Steve fell to the ground. She dragged him to the lander and strapped him in. As they took off, Steve woke and he told her what she was doing was very bad and that he will never trust her, that she shot him with a pulse rifle. Sabla didn't say anything. She was furious at what he did. Once they reached the space station, Sabla made an accurate report of their expedition. General Reyes was furious. He was mad first at Sabla. He yelled at her, "You shot your partner?" Sabla answered, "Well, I had to." Then he turned to Steve and said, "You are going to stay on the planet abandoning your mission? If I had replacements, I would have replaced both of you," told them, said the general. The two have nothing to say, so he dismissed them. They were given 3 days to recover. The next 3 days later, they met on departure deck. Sabla seems upset. Steve approached her and told her, "Why didn't you come and visit me while I recover?" Sabla told him, "I didn't have to." Steve said, "You're the one who shot me. You should have come and take care of me." Sabla said, "Next time, I don't have to shoot you." Steve said, "Why not?" Sabla told him, "Because this is the last mission, and after this, the two will be separated." She told him that she has applied to be switched partners, and that General Reyes has agreed to that, but he has to ask the other groups if they were willing to switch. So when they returned, they are going to switch partners and that they no longer have to see each other. So Sabla and Steve, the two exo-astronauts, entered their ship, and their ship entered the wormhole for their final exploration.
The red giant star filled half the sky, a molten eye casting its slow, heavy light across the surface of the planet. The ship drifted down through the thick atmosphere, and below them stretched a strange paradise, an endless sea of color and softness. The sensors read breathable air, mild temperature, and abundant flora. But it was the texture of the place that stunned them. "This looks like cotton," Steve murmured as they set the lantern down in a clearing. Sybil crouched, running her gloved hand over the grass. It wasn't grass at all. It was soft, like silk threads woven together, shimmering in hues of gold and pale blue. "Fluffy," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Every tree around them swayed gently, as if breathing. The trunks were velvety, the fronds feathery like enormous ferns. Even the wind seemed muted, moving through the soft landscape without sound. "Let's take some samples," Steve said, breaking the silence. Sybil didn't answer. She was already walking ahead, her scanner in hand, her pace brisk and deliberate. "Sybil," he called. "About what happened on Farda." She froze, her shoulders stiffening. "I was out of my mind," he continued, voice low. "The stuff in the air, it messed with me. I wasn't thinking straight. Still nothing. I should have listened to you," he said, stepping closer. "I'm sorry." She turned away, her voice sharp and quiet. Don't what? Don't make this about forgiveness, Steve. You don't get to apologize and reset everything." She picked up her pace, pushing through the fuzzy fronds. "Let's just finish this mission and be done." He sighed and followed, but soon the jungle swallowed them both. The soft ground absorbed their footsteps. The fuzzy trees grew denser, their cottony branches tangling above like a web. Sybil realized she could no longer hear Steve behind her. "Steve?" she called, tapping her cum. "Sybil, wait, there's some kind of interference. I can barely," his voice cut to static. "Steve, can you hear me?" Nothing. The silence pressed on her, thick and smothering. She turned in a circle, scanning, but every direction looked the same. Pale gold light filtering through the plush canopy. She started walking again. Faster this time, anger giving way to dread. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. How far could he? Then she stopped, trembling slightly. Her cum blinked incoming signal. "Sybil, can you hear me?" Steve's voice came through faintly. "I think I found a cave. Big one. Looks safe for the night." Relief washed over her. "I hear you. I'm coming. Climb one of the big trees," he said. "You should see smoke. I've got a signal fire going." She climbed. The trunk felt like a living cushion under her gloves. When she reached high enough, she spotted the plume, a thin dark line cutting through the pastel horizon. "I see it," she said. "Good. Hurry. It's getting dark here faster than it should." But as she began her descent, the forest changed. The light dimmed, and the fuzzy trunks shivered. The air grew heavy, vibrating faintly, a strange hum echoing through the canopy. Then she heard the beating of wings. She looked up and froze. Out of the deepening dusk swooped a swarm of creatures. Enormous bat-like birds, their wings leathery and translucent, their eyes glowing orange. Each had talons like hooked knives. Sybil ran. The creatures dove, shrieking, slashing at her. Her suit flashed warning signals. Impact detected. Integrity 92%. 75%. 60%. "Steve." She gasped into the cum. "I'm under attack." "Sybil? Where are you?" She ducked as one of the beasts raked its claws across her helmet. The HUD flared red. Structural breach imminent. Suit integrity 50%. The onboard AI warned flatly. She sprinted through the glowing jungle, the soft ground slowing her down like sand. The birds kept coming, shrieking, slashing, circling in the pulsing half-light. "Sebo, talk to me." Steve's voice crackled through the cum. "I'm running north, I think," she shouted, jumping over a low trunk. "They're everywhere, Steve. They're everywhere." The creatures closed in, their talons scraping sparks against her armor. She stumbled, rolled, fired her pulse rifle blindly into the air, searing light slicing through the darkness. The flock screamed and scattered. A storm of wings vanishing into the trees. Sebo lay gasping, her helmet flickering. The soft grass beneath her shimmered faintly with her suit's emergency lights. "Sebo?" Steve's voice came again. "You okay?" She took a breath, staring at the bruised red sky. "Suit integrity at 50%, she said weakly. "But I'm alive." "Keep coming," Steve said, his voice steady now, urgent. "I've got the fire going brighter. Just follow the smoke." Sebo pushed herself up, gripping her rifle. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, fear, or fury. She couldn't tell. "Copy that," she whispered. She looked toward the distant plume of smoke and started walking. Sebo stumbled into the clearing, breath ragged, suit scorched, and claw-marked. The swarm had stopped following her, at least for now. Ahead, the cave entrance flickered with orange light. "Steve," she cried. He appeared at the cave mouth. Rifle in hand, the fire behind him casting tall shadows across the jagged walls. When he saw her, his shoulders dropped in relief. "Sebo," he shouted, rushing forward. She collapsed into his arms, trembling, breathless. They almost got me," she said between gasps. He held her tightly, his voice low. "You're okay. You made it." The two of them sank by the fire, the glow washing over their scratched suits. For a moment, neither spoke. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a fragile calm. "We'll stay here till morning," Steve said finally. "The fire should keep them away." Sebo nodded, too exhausted to argue. She leaned against the cave wall, eyes half closed, the warmth of the flames lulling her into a fragile sense of safety. But it didn't last. A faint rustle echoed deeper within the cave. Then another. Then dozens. Steve straightened, frowning. "You hear that?" Before Sebo could answer, the shadows on the far wall began to move. Shapes detached from the darkness, wings, claws, and burning orange eyes. "Oh no," Sebo whispered. The cave wasn't empty. It was their nest. With a sudden deafening shriek, the first of the bat-like creatures dived at them, talons flashing. Steve fired. The shot lit up the cave in white-blue light. The creature exploded in a burst of flame and feathers. But more followed. "Behind you," Sebo shouted. He turned, firing again and again. The air filled with the smell of burning flesh and ozone. But the swarm kept coming, screaming and slashing. They weren't afraid of the fire. They hated it. They're protecting the nest. Sebo yelled over the chaos. "I'm out," Steve snapped, tossing his empty rifle aside. In one motion, he drew his combat knife and lashed it to the rifle's barrel with a strip of torn belt. "Guess we're doing this the old-fashioned way." The next creature lunged. He drove the blade through its chest, pinning it to the cave floor. Another swooped from above. He rolled, slashing upward, the blade cutting deep. Sebo fought beside him, swinging a burning log like a club. Sparks rained through the cave as the fire dwindled. "Steve," she cried, "the fire's dying. I see it." He looked toward the cave mouth and saw it, a narrow crevasse running along the outer wall, half hidden in shadow. It was barely wide enough for one person. "Sebel," he shouted, pointing. "Get in there. Now. I'm not leaving you." "Go," he barked, eyes blazing. "That's an order." Reluctantly, she dove for the crevasse, scrambling inside. Steve turned to face the onslaught. The creatures came in waves now, shrieking, clawing, tearing. His suit alarms blared, integrity critical. Breach in progress. Blood ran down his arm, hot and sticky inside his glove. He swung wildly, driving the blade into one creature's neck, kicking another back into the flames. His breath came in ragged bursts. "Come on," he roared, stabbing, swinging, blocking. "Come and get it." But exhaustion set in. The world swam in and out of focus. His legs gave way. One last creature lunged, and then everything went black. Sebel screamed his name and crawled out from the crevasse. The cave was littered with charred bodies. The air was thick with the stench of blood and smoke. "Steve," she cried, dropping beside him. He was still, face pale, his suit torn open at the shoulder. She pressed her gloved hand to his chest. No rise, no pulse. "Come on, Steve," she whispered. "Don't do this. Don't you dare." Nothing. Her strength gave out. She collapsed beside him, her helmet touching his. Outside, the first light of dawn crept into the cave, turning the walls pale gold. Sebel closed her eyes, a single tear tracing down her cheek inside the visor. The cave fell silent. Only the distant hum of the red giant's winds broke the stillness, and the faint flicker of the dying fire beside two explorers. Alone on a faraway world,